The desert sun blazed mercilessly over the rocky terrain of Afghanistan's Helmand province as Lieutenant Commander Jake adjusted his scope for the third time in 20 minutes. Sweat dripped steadily from beneath his helmet, creating small dark spots in the sand below his prone position. The SEAL team had been lying motionless for nearly 4 hours, watching the Taliban compound through their high-powered optics, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. His radio crackled softly in his earpiece. "Overwatch, this is Alpha Team. We have movement in the courtyard, 3 tangos, possibly more inside the main building." The voice belonged to Chief Petty Officer, leading the ground assault team positioned 200 meters closer to the target. "Copy that, Alpha," whispered into his throat mic. "I have eyes on your 3 tangos, 2 more just emerged from the eastern building. Permission to engage." "Negative, Overwatch. Hold your fire. We need to confirm the hostage location first." His finger hovered over the trigger of his MK-11 sniper rifle. Through his scope, he could see the Taliban fighters moving with casual confidence, completely unaware that death was watching them from the distant ridge. Intelligence had confirmed that Sarah Mitchell, a captured aid worker, was being held somewhere in the compound. The mission was clear: extract the hostage, eliminate all threats, leave no trace. The team had been inserted via helicopter 12 clicks away at 300 hours. They had moved through the treacherous mountain terrain under cover of darkness, avoiding known patrol routes and IED hotspots. Spotter, Petty Officer First Class Danny, lay beside him with a pair of high-powered binoculars, scanning for additional threats. "Movement 2 o'clock, whispered. "Looks like a guard rotation." Shifted his scope and immediately spotted 2 more Taliban fighters emerging from what appeared to be a guard post. They carried AK-47s and moved with the disciplined gait of experienced fighters. These weren't the typical poorly trained insurgents the SEALs usually encountered. Something felt different about this operation. "Alpha, be advised, we have additional tangos on the eastern perimeter. Count now at 7 hostiles visible. Recommend extreme caution on approach." His voice came back tense. "Overwatch, we're moving to Phase 2. Keep us covered." Watched through his scope as the assault team began their careful advance toward the compound. The plan was textbook and would provide Overwatch from their elevated position while led his 4-man team in a direct assault. 2 other SEALs and Williams would breach from the rear while Petty Officer Jackson covered their 6. The compound consisted of 3 main buildings arranged in an L shape around a central courtyard. Adobe walls approximately 8 feet high surrounded the entire complex, with a single vehicle entrance on the south side. Had memorized every detail during their mission briefing, but seeing it in person always revealed nuances that satellite imagery missed. Suddenly gripped his arm. "Jake, we've got a problem. Look at the northwest corner, high window." Adjusted his scope and felt his blood run cold. Through the second-story window of the main building, he could see the distinctive outline of a sniper rifle barrel extending just slightly beyond the window frame. Someone else was playing Overwatch, and they had a commanding view of the compound's approaches. "Alpha Team, abort approach immediately," hissed into his radio. "Enemy sniper position identified in the main building, northwest corner, 2nd floor. You're walking into a kill zone." "Say again, Overwatch." His voice carried confusion and concern. "Enemy sniper, northwest building, 2nd floor window. He's got you dead to rights if you continue current approach." There was a moment of deadly silence on the radio. Kept his scope trained on the enemy sniper position, trying to get a clear shot, but the angle was wrong and the target was too well concealed. Through his peripheral vision, he could see the assault team had frozen in place behind a low stone wall, approximately 100 meters from the compound entrance. Was scanning the compound with his binoculars when he suddenly went rigid. "Jake, there's more. I count at least 3 additional sniper positions. This isn't just a hostage situation. This is a trap." His mind raced as he processed this new information. The intelligence briefing had made no mention of a significant enemy presence. Sarah Mitchell had supposedly been captured 2 days ago while delivering medical supplies to a remote village. The Taliban had demanded the release of 5 high-value prisoners in exchange for her life. But now it was becoming clear that this operation had been compromised from the beginning. "Overwatch to all units," spoke into his radio, his voice calm despite the adrenaline coursing through his system. "This is a no-go situation. We have multiple enemy sniper positions and unknown number of additional hostiles. Recommend immediate extraction." But even as he spoke those words, new extraction wouldn't be simple. The Taliban had chosen this location carefully. The compound sat in a natural depression surrounded by higher ground on three sides. Any withdrawal would expose the SEALs to deadly crossfire from multiple directions. His voice came through the radio, steady and professional. Overwatch, extraction is not an option. We have movement on the ridge behind you. Enemy forces are moving to cut off our exit routes. His blood turned to ice. He and were positioned on what they had assumed was an uncompromised Overwatch position, but if was correct, they were about to become targets themselves. Was already turning to scan the terrain behind their position when the first shot rang out. The bullet struck the rock face inches from his head, sending stone fragments flying. Both SEALs immediately rolled away from their firing positions, seeking cover behind a larger boulder formation. His radio was alive with urgent chatter as the entire team realized they were surrounded. Contact rear, contact rear. His voice was sharp with adrenaline. Multiple hostiles approaching from the southeast. We're taking effective fire. Crawled to a new position where he could maintain visual contact with the compound while staying protected from the sniper who had nearly taken his head off. Through his scope, he could see muzzle flashes from at least 4 different positions within the compound walls. The Taliban had turned the entire area into a carefully prepared ambush zone. Slithered up beside him, blood running from a cut on his cheek where rock fragments had struck him. Count at least 8 hostiles on the ridge behind us, he reported breathlessly. They're approximately 400 meters out and closing fast. The situation was deteriorating rapidly. The SEAL team was caught in a complex ambush with enemy forces both in front of them and behind them. Their communication with headquarters was becoming sporadic due to the mountainous terrain, and their planned extraction point was now certainly compromised. Made a quick tactical assessment. The team had 3 options: fight their way out through the compound, attempt to break contact and withdraw through hostile terrain, or establish a defensive perimeter and call for emergency extraction. None of the options were good, but staying in their current position would result in the entire team being systematically picked off by enemy snipers. "All units, this is Overwatch," spoke into his radio with the calm authority that had made him one of the Navy's most respected sniper instructors. "We're going to have to fight our way out. Alpha Team, prepare to assault the compound. We'll provide covering fire and neutralize as many sniper positions as possible." "Roger, Overwatch. Alpha Team moving in 60 seconds. Settled behind his rifle and began acquiring targets. The enemy sniper who had nearly killed him was still positioned in the northwest window. Through his scope, could see just enough of the target to attempt a shot. The range was approximately 600 meters with a slight crosswind from the east. He controlled his breathing, found his natural respiratory pause, and gently squeezed the trigger. The rifle bucked against his shoulder and through his scope, saw the enemy sniper jerk backward and disappear from the window. One down. Was spotting targets and calling out corrections as moved to engage the next sniper position. Second target, main building, southeast corner, ground level window. Range approximately 550 meters. Adjusted his aim and fired again. This time he saw dust and debris fly from the window frame, but couldn't confirm the hit. Return fire began impacting around their position immediately, forcing both SEALs to seek better cover. The sound of automatic weapons fire erupted from multiple directions as the trapped SEAL team fought desperately to survive the carefully orchestrated ambush. And his assault team had begun their movement toward the compound, but they were taking heavy fire from entrenched positions. Realized with growing dread that this was unlike any mission he had ever experienced. Someone had leaked detailed information about their operation, someone who knew SEAL tactics and had prepared accordingly. The Taliban fighters weren't behaving like typical insurgents. They were displaying coordination and tactical awareness that suggested professional military training. As bullets whistled overhead and explosions echoed through the rocky terrain, understood that the next few hours would determine whether any of them would return home alive. The hunter had become the hunted, and somewhere in the chaos of gunfire and desperate radio chatter, Sarah Mitchell's fate hung in the balance. The real battle was just beginning. The firefight had been raging for 23 minutes when heard something that made his blood run cold. Through the chaos of automatic weapons, fire, and shouting, a woman's scream echoed from within the compound. Sarah Mitchell was alive, but her terrified cry told that the Taliban were using her as a psychological weapon against the attacking SEALs. "Did everyone copy that?" His voice was tight with controlled fury over the radio. "The hostage is definitely in there, and they're making sure we know it." Wiped sweat and grit from his eyes as he surveyed the battlefield through his scope. The situation had evolved into a deadly stalemate. His team controlled the high ground behind them after a vicious 15-minute firefight that had left 3 Taliban fighters dead, but the enemy still held strong defensive positions throughout the compound. Every time the assault team tried to advance, they were driven back by accurate sniper fire. Crawled up beside, his uniform torn and dirty from diving between rock formations. "I've been monitoring radio chatter," he whispered urgently. "They're speaking in code, but I think reinforcements are coming. We might have 30 minutes, maybe less, before this place is swarming with hostiles." Nodded grimly as he studied the compound layout through his scope. The Taliban had positioned their forces with tactical precision that suggested foreign military advisors. The sniper positions provided overlapping fields of fire, the defensive positions were mutually supporting, and they had established clear fallback routes through the buildings. "Alpha Team, this is Overwatch," spoke into his radio. "We need to change tactics. The direct assault isn't working, and intelligence suggests enemy reinforcements inbound. I'm going to create a diversion." "Negative, Overwatch," replied immediately. "Your position is too valuable. We need your Overwatch capability." Was already moving, gathering his equipment and preparing to relocate. "Can maintain Overwatch. I'm going to work around to the eastern approach and create chaos from inside their perimeter. When you hear my signal, punch through the front entrance." It was a desperate plan, but knew they were running out of options. The longer they remained pinned down, the more enemy fighters would arrive to tip the balance decisively against them. Someone had to break the stalemate, and its advanced sniper training had included extensive close-quarters combat techniques. Gripped his arm as he prepared to move. "Jake, this is suicide. There's no way you can infiltrate that compound alone." Checked his sidearm and ensured his radio was secure. "Danny, I've been thinking about this ambush. Someone leaked our mission details, someone who knew our tactics and timing, but they made one mistake. They assumed we'd stick to doctrine." Moving carefully from rock to rock, began working his way down the slope toward the eastern side of the compound. The route would take him through a dry creek bed that offered concealment, but also channeled him into a potentially deadly bottleneck. He moved in short rushes, pausing frequently to listen for signs of enemy movement. The compound's eastern wall was the lowest and oldest section, constructed of stacked stones rather than the newer concrete blocks used elsewhere. Had identified what appeared to be a weakness during his initial reconnaissance, a section where recent rains had washed away some of the mortar between stones. As approached the wall, he could hear voices from inside the compound speaking in rapid Pashto. His limited understanding of the language allowed him to catch fragments of the conversation. They were arguing about something, and one voice was clearly more agitated than the others. Pressed himself against the wall and listened intently. Through the gaps between stones, he could hear footsteps moving back and forth in what sounded like a heated discussion. One voice was speaking with an accent that didn't sound entirely Afghan. Suspicions about foreign advisors were being confirmed. Using his combat knife, carefully began working loose one of the larger stones in the wall. The mortar was old and crumbled away relatively easily, but each scraping sound seemed unnaturally loud in the desert silence. After several tense minutes, he managed to create an opening large enough to peer through. What he saw made him freeze in shock. Sarah Mitchell was indeed inside the compound, but she wasn't bound or showing signs of physical abuse. She was sitting calmly at a small table, drinking tea with a man in civilian clothes who was definitely not Afghan. The man had pale skin, light brown hair, and was speaking English with what sounded like a European accent. Strained to hear their conversation, and what he heard changed everything about the mission. "The Americans should be completely pinned down by now," the European man was saying. "Your fighters are performing exactly as we discussed during training." Sarah Mitchell nodded and replied in perfect, unaccented English. "The SEAL team composition was exactly as I reported. Is their primary sniper, leads the assault element, and they're following standard small unit tactics." His mind reeled as he processed what he was hearing. Sarah Mitchell wasn't a hostage at all. She was the source of the intelligence leak that had turned this mission into an ambush. The captured aid worker story had been an elaborate deception designed to lure a SEAL team into a carefully prepared kill zone. Through his earpiece, could hear the ongoing firefight as his teammates continued to risk their lives attempting to rescue someone who had betrayed them. Was calling for a coordinated assault on the main building, unaware that their supposed hostage was collaborating with the enemy. Carefully worked to enlarge the opening in the wall while processing this devastating revelation. Sarah Mitchell had somehow infiltrated the aid organization and gained access to classified mission briefings. The European advisor was clearly a professional military instructor, probably former special forces from one of several countries known to provide training to terrorist organizations. "How long before the reinforcements arrive?" Sarah asked, checking an expensive-looking watch on her wrist. 15 minutes maximum, the European replied. "The American team will be completely surrounded and eliminated. This operation will send a clear message about the consequences of operating in this region." Now understood the full scope of the trap. This wasn't just about killing a single SEAL team. It was a propaganda operation designed to demonstrate that even America's elite special forces could be outmaneuvered and destroyed through superior intelligence and tactics. He had to warn his team immediately, but moving away from the wall would expose him to the enemy snipers still positioned throughout the compound. Made a calculated decision that would either save his teammates or result in his own death. Working quickly but quietly, enlarged the hole in the wall enough to squeeze through. Once inside the compound, he would have perhaps 60 seconds before someone noticed his presence. He had to move fast and create maximum confusion. Slipped through the opening and immediately moved to his left, staying close to the wall and using shadows for concealment. Through a doorway 20 meters away, he could see Sarah Mitchell and her European handler still engaged in conversation, completely unaware of his presence. The compound's layout was more complex than satellite imagery had revealed. Several smaller outbuildings connected the main structures, creating a maze of covered walkways and hidden corners. Could hear Taliban fighters calling to each other from various positions, coordinating their defensive fire against his teammates' continued assault attempts. Moving like a ghost through the shadows, positioned himself near the building where Sarah Mitchell and the European were meeting. Through a crack in the wooden door, he could see them clearly and continue listening to their conversation. "The Americans are more stubborn than anticipated," the European was saying with obvious frustration. "They should have attempted withdrawal by now." Sarah Mitchell's laugh was cold and calculating. "You don't understand SEAL mentality. They'll die before abandoning a teammate. That's exactly what makes them so predictable." Felt rage building in his chest, but he forced himself to remain calm and focused. Emotional reactions would get him and his teammates killed. He needed to gather more intelligence and then act decisively. Through his earpiece, he heard his voice reporting from the Overwatch position. "All units be advised. Large dust cloud approaching from the northeast. Estimate 15 to 20 vehicles, ETA 10 minutes. The reinforcements were arriving ahead of schedule. Team was about to be overwhelmed by superior numbers unless he could somehow turn the situation around. Looking through the compound, began formulating a desperate plan that would require split-second timing and incredible luck. He keyed his radio and whispered, "All units, this is Overwatch Actual. Maintain current positions and await my signal. The situation is not what it appears to be." Could hear the confusion in his voice when he responded. "Overwatch Actual, explain your status. Are you inside the compound?" "Roger, stand by for major tactical update. Things are about to change dramatically." Drew his sidearm and prepared to confront the two people whose deception had nearly cost his entire team their lives. But first, he needed to position himself for maximum psychological impact and ensure he could control the situation long enough to extract the information his teammates needed to survive. The next few minutes would determine not only whether the SEAL team escaped the ambush alive, but whether Sarah Mitchell and her European handler would face justice for their deadly betrayal. Burst through the door with his weapon trained on the two conspirators, moving with the fluid precision that had made him legendary among SEAL snipers. Sarah Mitchell's teacup shattered on the floor as she jumped in shock, while the European advisor reached instinctively for a pistol on the table before freezing when he saw unwavering aim. Hands where I can see them, both of you, commanded in a voice that carried absolute authority. You move, you die. Sarah Mitchell's mask of innocent victimhood completely dropped, replaced by cold calculation as she evaluated her situation. You have no idea what you've stumbled into, Lieutenant Commander, she said with icy composure. This operation is much larger than one SEAL team. Kept his weapon trained on both targets while speaking into his throat mic. All units, this is Overwatch Actual. The hostage is compromised. Repeat, Sarah Mitchell is hostile and working with enemy forces. She is the source of our intelligence leak. The European advisor, who appeared to be in his late 30s with the bearing of professional military training, spoke with a slight German accent. I am Colonel Hans Weber, formerly of the GSG-9. You cannot possibly escape this compound alive, American. Through his earpiece, Hurd's shocked voice. Overwatch Actual, confirm your last transmission. Are you saying Mitchell is working with the Taliban? Confirmed, Alpha Leader. Mitchell provided detailed intelligence about our team composition and tactics. This entire mission was designed as an elimination trap. Enemy reinforcements approaching from multiple directions. Could see through the window that dust clouds were growing larger on the horizon. The Taliban reinforcements would arrive within minutes, bringing overwhelming firepower and numbers. His team needed to extract immediately, but first needed intelligence about the scope of this betrayal. How many operations have you compromised? Demanded, pressing the barrel of his pistol closer to Sarah Mitchell's forehead. How many American have died because of your information? Sarah Mitchell smiled with disturbing calmness. More than you can imagine. The aid organization has been feeding intelligence to resistance fighters across 3 countries for over 18 months. Your precious special operations forces aren't as special as they think. Colonel Weber remained motionless, but his eyes were calculating, clearly looking for any opportunity to turn the situation. Your government's foreign policy has created enemies everywhere. We are simply leveling the playing field. Realize the full scope of the conspiracy. This wasn't just about one betrayed mission. Sarah Mitchell had been systematically compromising American operations across the region, leading to casualties that the military had attributed to improved enemy tactics rather than intelligence leaks. The sound of automatic weapons fire outside was intensifying as teammates fought desperately against increasing Taliban pressure. Through his earpiece, he could hear calling out enemy positions from his Overwatch point, but the situation was deteriorating rapidly. Made a tactical decision that would either save his team or ensure they all died together. Colonel Weber, you're going to call off your fighters and provide safe passage for my team, or I'm going to execute both of you right now. Weber laughed harshly. You Americans always think violence is the solution. Even if you kill us, your team cannot possibly escape the reinforcements approaching this position. His radio crackled with urgent updates from his teammates, and Williams were reporting that their rear security position was being overrun by Taliban fighters moving up from the valley floor. Jackson was calling for immediate medical evacuation for who had taken shrapnel from an RPG that had exploded near the assault team's position. The situation was becoming hopeless, but knew that conventional tactics wouldn't work against enemies who had anticipated every standard SEAL response. He needed to create chaos and confusion that would allow his teammates to break contact and escape. Grabbed Sarah Mitchell and pressed his pistol against her temple. Here's what's going to happen, Colonel. You're going to order your fighters to concentrate their fire on this building. Tell them the Americans have taken hostages and are fortified in here. Weber's eyes narrowed as he processed unexpected request. You want us to attack this position? That is suicide. Smile was cold and predatory. That's exactly what I want you to think. Make the call or I start shooting. Understanding dawned in Weber's eyes as he realized strategy. By drawing all enemy fire toward the building where they were located, would create a diversion that might allow his teammates to escape, while the Taliban focused their attention on the wrong target. Weber reluctantly reached for a radio handset on the table. This is insane, he muttered as kept his weapon trained on both conspirators. All units, this is command, Weber spoke into the radio in Pashto. American forces have taken hostages in the main building. Concentrate all fire on that position. Use RPGs and heavy weapons. Destroy the building completely. Could immediately hear the change in the pattern of gunfire outside as Taliban fighters began repositioning to engage what they believed was the primary American position. Through his earpiece, he heard's confused voice reporting the enemy tactical shift. "All units, this is Overwatch Actual," spoke rapidly into his radio. "Enemy forces are concentrating on my position. Execute immediate withdrawal to extraction point Bravo. Do not attempt rescue. Repeat, do not attempt rescue." His voice came through weakly, indicating he was more seriously injured than initially reported. "Overwatch Actual, we are not leaving without you." Felt a surge of pride in his teammates even as he prepared for what was likely a suicide mission. "Alpha Leader, that is a direct order. Extract the team. Intelligence gathered here is critical to preventing future compromised operations." The first RPG struck the building's eastern wall, sending shock waves through the structure and filling the air with choking dust and debris. Shoved both prisoners toward an interior doorway that led to what appeared to be a storage area with thicker walls. "Move," commanded as automatic weapons fire began raking the building's exterior walls. The Taliban were following Weber's instructions perfectly, concentrating everything they had on destroying the structure that supposedly contained the trapped American forces. Sarah Mitchell stumbled as another explosion rocked the building. "You're insane. You'll kill us all." Grabbed both prisoners and forced them into the storage room, which appeared to have been constructed as some sort of safe room with reinforced concrete walls. "That's the general idea. The difference is my death will save my teammates. Your deaths will just eliminate 2 traitors." Weber was studying with what might have been professional respect. "You are sacrificing yourself to save 5 men. This is tactically illogical." Checked his radio and weapon while debris continued falling around them. "That's why you'll never understand Americans, Colonel. We don't abandon our own, and we don't calculate the mathematical value of sacrifice." Through his earpiece, could hear his teammates moving toward the extraction point, with providing cover fire from his overwatch position. The diversion was working perfectly. The Taliban were so focused on destroying the main building that they had failed to notice the American withdrawal. But situation was becoming increasingly desperate. The building was taking systematic destruction from multiple RPG teams, and it was only a matter of time before the structure collapsed completely. He needed to find a way to escape before the Taliban realized they were attacking an empty building. Studied the storage room more carefully and noticed what appeared to be a tunnel entrance hidden behind stacked supply crates. Many Afghan compounds had underground tunnels for moving supplies and people during conflicts, often dating back decades to previous wars. "Where does that tunnel lead?" demanded, pressing his pistol against Weber's head. Weber hesitated before answering. "It connects to a cave system approximately 1 kilometer north of here, but it has not been used in years and may be blocked." Made his decision instantly. The tunnel represented his only chance of escape, and taking the 2 prisoners with him would provide valuable intelligence about the scope of the conspiracy that had cost so many American lives. "We're going for a walk," announced as another massive explosion shook the building. "Both of you move toward that tunnel entrance. Try to run, try to signal for help, try anything except exactly what I tell you, and I'll put a bullet in your spine." As forced his prisoners toward the tunnel entrance, he could hear through his earpiece that his teammates had successfully reached the extraction point. Was calling for emergency helicopter evacuation for, whose condition was deteriorating due to blood loss from his shrapnel wounds. Felt a mixture of relief and grim satisfaction. His teammates would survive. The intelligence about Sarah Mitchell's betrayal would prevent future compromised operations, and he still had a chance to escape with 2 high-value prisoners who could provide information about enemy networks throughout the region. But first, he had to survive the journey through an unknown tunnel system while Taliban fighters searched the ruins of the compound above. Pushed the 2 prisoners into the dark tunnel entrance, following close behind with his weapon ready. Behind them, the main building finally collapsed in a thunderous crash of falling concrete and twisted metal. The hunt through the underground darkness was just beginning, but had turned a devastating ambush into a tactical victory that would save countless American lives. Sometimes the hunter had to become the hunted in order to protect the pack, for that transformation was exactly what being a Navy SEAL meant.